Today we're going to be checking out Breadsword, the Disney's Robin Hood, and the Death of Color. I've never checked out anything from Breadsword before. I don't really know what they get into, and I have no idea what their humor style is. I have no idea if I'm going to like this or not. And more importantly, I have no idea if this video will actually be live on YouTube because it involves things that may or may not be Disney, considering it says Disney's Robin Hood. So we'll see if this video is even allowed to go live. I don't know. Also, I should probably cop to this right now. I've never watched Disney's Robin Hood. Yeah. My wife is still actually upset about that and wants to correct it. And then we all kind of forget about that part. So I'm going into this with less idea of anything, not just the commentary, but the commentary subject. I got no idea about any of this. So it's going to be me learning out a lot about what's happening. I don't know. I have no idea what's going to happen here. Also, I have no idea if I'm going to like Breadsword stuff or not. Although I will admit they have an amazing name and I am so incredibly jealous. It is not even funny. I just... Breadsword. Why? Just... did not think of it in time. And that's on me. Either way, let's see what happens. Or where happens. Well, I can English. We're going to do what's worth the where and the who and the how. That's exactly how I should say things now. Let's get started.
Hey, this video is sponsored by NordVPN. If there's one thing that's absolutely paramount in the age of information, it's the ability to protect what happens to yours in it. VPN stands for...
Was that Overwatch?
Virtual private network, and what it does is keep your data safe behind a wall of next generation encryption so that third parties, including your...
Oh, that's old school Ghost in the Shell. Oh, I haven't even seen those. I'm used to standalone complex.
Your own internet provider can't.
Oh, they have a lot of references to things that are old.
Whether you're placing bids on rare GameCube titles or in the middle of a Wikipedia deep dive at 3 a.m., did you know the Polish Army list?
Wait. GameCube is not old? Don't mind me. I'm just going to go sit on my porch and yell at the whippersnappers out there. I feel personally attacked by this video already. This is the freaking ad read.
Was it a bear during World War II? What the NordVPN has got you covered. And with up to 6 devices being able to connect to a single account, I can read more about Wojtek and his reported fondness for cigarettes on pretty much anything I want without a care.
I have no idea what most of these are.
Plus, if the sense of security isn't enough, having access to NordVPN servers across 59 countries means I can bypass region-specific limitations on the experiences I care about.
Don't know that one.
Can't watch an anime opening because it's blocked in your country.
I get JoJo.
No problem. Just a simple click, and as far as YouTube is concerned, I'm tapping in from the misty mountains of Japan. Live in a country where services like Discord are banned? Good news. You just moved.
People ban Discord? Oh, probably China.
From Dubai to New Zealand, and you didn't even have to pack your bags. And with a 30-day money-back guarantee, there's no downside to giving it a spin around the old digital block. Right now, you can get a huge discount on a 2-year plan, plus an additional bonus for free when you go to nordvpn.com.
Hey! Oh, I know this one. Oh, not... I know this anime. I love this anime. I completely forgot the name of this anime. Not Trigun. Outlaw Star, that's the one. That's such a good one too.
Breadsword, or use the code Breadsword at checkout.
I mean, they have good taste in anime.
Your internet experience today, and make sure your data stays cozy and safe. That's nordvpn.com/breadsword or the code Breadsword at checkout.
What are they? Back to registered programming? I don't recognize so many of these. Lupin, I've never seen, but I know of. Not really a big fan of thief shows.
There was once a great king who ruled in times of old.
You sure you want to talk about great kings and show Theoden? I mean, it makes sense if it's, in the third one, but the second one, he's, to be fair, this is the scene where he gets his mojo back, technically, so.
Far away from here and now, who is known to all his subjects as the King of the World. His name was Jamshid, the 4th Shah of the Pishdadian dynasty, recorded by the poet Phirdais in the epic The Shahnameh. It was said that Jamshid, greater than all those who came before him, was enshrouded in divine radiance, and raised to the sky by his vassals on a throne made of precious jewels, soared across the roof of the world to the marvel of all those within it.
I recognize Steam Boy, but out of all of those, live and digital, or I guess even hand-drawn, I don't recognize many of those. Damn. There's a lot going on here that I kind of hope he lists off all his sources, because there's some of these I kind of want to find out about.
Which he ruled. It is also said that the great ruler's name was Enki, Lord Earth to the Sumerians, Osiris to the Egyptians, Lord Murugan in Hindu scripture, Tausi Melik to the Yazidis of northern Iraq. In fact, there's a whole list. Kings of the world.
Why did they bring... Oh, they did the entire list from Fifth Element. That's why. There's just a long list picture. That's why.
Better, kings of the universe. In the Sumerian
Really,
city of
Super?
Kish, it was said that its kingship was lowered from heaven itself after the Great Flood, that whosoever ruled it was an emanation of the gods, and through them, culture and knowledge would flow forth.
I can't believe I'm going to say this, but this seems like anime Maxor. Not quite to the same level of manicness, but it's like someone talking slow, but editing in so many reference shots that it almost feels like Maxor, because I'm trying to figure out, okay, what's the reference you're referring to? You just gotta let it wash over you, man.
Like a river. A dramatic explanation as to why Kish long held
Atlantis?
a perceived preeminence over its neighboring cities, but the point is, it was effective. Really effective. People remembered it. In fact, King of Kish carried such a consecrated connotation that rulers began to bestow themselves its title, having never even been there. It became shorthand for king of the land, meaning all that lied between the Persian Gulf and the Mediterranean Sea. At that time, the world in its entirety to them.
Don't know
When
that
Sargon
anime
the Great
either.
later conquered Sumer, the title of King of Kish had evolved to mean King of the Universe. Lugal Ki Sa.
Also randomly, because he mentioned King of the Universe, so he brings up Unicron. Yeah.
Ra. For the next 2,000 years, empires and their rulers rose and fell under its mantle. Kings of the universe, every last one of
Gurren
them.
Lagann, nice
The
choice.
last name carved into their illustrious charter was Antiochus I, Lord of the Seleucids, whose reign lasted from 281 to 261 BC. Antiochus himself is of little importance. He lied about descending from Darius III and then married his stepmom. Pretty average king stuff, but his place in the
Okay, so this guy's aware of average king stuff. Also, okay.
list is because he was a king who existed. He was a person. He was a human being who lived and was recorded as having done so. With some degree of certainty, we can say that he was really here. Jamshid was not.
Oh?
Nor was Enki or Lord Murugan. Tausi Melek was a peacock. I mean no offense, of course, but same list, same mantle, same
Peacock?
universe, yet the head count is split. One side, regular Joes, the other, mythic heroes. Often
I mean, it kind of makes sense, though. The biggest thing for the longest time was kind of like he mentioned a guy lying about parentage. You compare yourself to the great heroes that people don't realize aren't real or don't care that aren't real because it builds up your credibility.
times with little in the way of distinction, humanity's predisposition to record our own history as
Wait, what? Why would...
poetry ever rendering our past in an unwaveringly thickening fog. The oldest name on the list of Sumerian kings is Alulim. And why shouldn't it be?
Oh?
Alulim is a great name. I've always liked that about him, except in the inscriptions, his reign is said to have lasted for 8 Sars, 28,800 years.
Oh.
Maybe the links of time were imprinted according to a ruler's importance rather than lifespan. Maybe the
There also was a thing where it is very well known that older rulers, and by older, I mean within the last 100 years, sometimes still inflate how long they've been alive or how long they've ruled for, or just say, I've always ruled, and you're going to accept it or die.
units of measurement aren't being read properly within context. No one knows
Stargate?
if
Oh,
Alulim
wasn't expecting that
was
reference.
really here. Not quite human, not quite God. A new
Okay, I get the Marvel one, but was that freaking not... This is a hotel movie. The guy who did The Isle of Dogs, I don't remember the name of it, was not expecting that to drop in here.
quite human, not quite God. A new type of being created in the
Zorro?
blurriness of our understanding of ourselves, residing somewhere between the cracks of the great ledgers of the kings of the universe. A legend.
Robin Hood?
And I'm
Know
going to
that
show
one.
you how to kill one.
What?
Anyways, I'm really smart and this is... Wait, what?
I honestly wish someone had warned me that Breadsword's entire animation style was, I'm going to slap you in the face with every reference possibly imaginable to every 5 seconds of me speaking, because it is distinct. I don't mind it either. It's not bad, but whoa, God, Grand Budapest Hotel, Cara, that's the one? Yeah, thanks. I feel like I'm watching a Maxor video, except it's not jokes. It's just random references to every little thing he says. And sorry, my fixation on just like, oh, I get that, is making me want to pause every few seconds to do it, which I'm pretty sure I've been doing. Here's the thing. I don't mean to. I have no choice. I must do it. I see a reference. I try to understand it. And then I kick myself in the ass for not understanding it. I know I don't understand, but there should be a reference there that I should understand and still not getting it. So it's like, yeah, you know, standard. This is normal. I'm not crazy as I think I am. It's insane.
You know what I'm saying? I used to be in gym class like, nigga, I'm finna be a rapper.
Yep. Still not a bad choice though, because I don't know this song, but it sounds very familiar. Lightly Breadsword? Did they actually redo part of not Outlaw Star, wow. Cowboy Bebop just to get their own little title drop? That's impressive and terrifying. I don't know a lot of these anime though. Looks like I should. Your ass barely passed in every class, making every ass cheat on every test. I don't know that anime. Looks familiar though. Very 90s. Blue Hush, you call this rap pop? I don't know nearly enough about music to tell anything about that. Hell, I don't even know pop anymore. Granted, I didn't know pop ever, so anymore is wrong.
All right. The 1970s were a
Saw
really
Who Framed
tumultuous
Roger
time.
Rabbit.
The Beatles had just broken up, Kay Breezy dropped A Clockwork Orange, and Atari was filling arcades with what were soon to become the foundation of the video game industry as we know it. And at the same time,
You guys remember arcades? I don't. They've literally never existed anywhere near me. That sucks.
the fervent idealism and communitarianism of the 1960s had begun to rapidly fade away to reveal a world nearly as bleak and unforgiving as the one the zeitgeist had hoped to leave behind.
Hey, can you imagine a bleak and unforgiving world? The past is a crazy thing.
Disney were opening the gates to their second park ever, the most magical place on Earth, Walt Disney World in Bay Lake, Florida.
Wait, that only opened in the 70s? For some reason, I thought it was older.
Fortunately, the development of the park wasn't exactly what you would call a breeze, and this left the Magic Kingdom standing on shaky ground heading into the brave new world. Alongside Disney World, Walt had also planned to develop a ski resort in the Mineral King Valley of Sequoia National Park, but arduous legal battles with preservationists ultimately spelled the end for the tourist trap to be, but not before draining some serious coin from the Big D's pockets. Alongside this, Walt Disney Productions had to shed some 40...
Wait, they tried to make a park in the Sequoia National Park for skiing? Yeah, they kind of dodged a bullet on that one, considering it's getting hotter up there, so it might be more expensive now than if they had actually built it.
$1 million worth of equity stock to pay to develop the new park in Florida.
I'm sorry, how much?
Productions had to shed some $40 million worth of equity stock to pay
$40 million in the 70s. How much is that now? 1970s is worth how much now? Now, this is just a I'm throwing Google up on the screen moment, but according to random response that comes up immediately, $40 million in 1970s is worth $321 million today because of a 700% increase. So yeah, that's a lot. 40 million sounds like a lot. And then you hear 300 million is closer to accurate now, and fuck.
to develop the new park in Florida at the behest of Roy Disney, who had come out of retirement to see it through its construction after Walt passed away from lung cancer in 1966.
Obviously smoked,
Basically, the 70s were a big ball of bad news, saturated in some sunshine. And this, along with Disney having a whole $0 to complete new films with, ultimately led the studio down a path of productions that, to me, remain the most unique period in the company's long history.
Oh yeah, because for the longest time, they were just trying a bunch of random things. And some of them were good, some of them weren't.
Talking, of course, about the dark age of Disney. A run of films beginning in 1970 and ending nearly 2 decades later in 1988, wherein almost everything the House of Mouse dropped struggled to find the audience and critical reception the studio had by then grown so accustomed to.
I know the joke here is he's bringing up Dumb and Dumber to show not finding acceptance because this guy's like, what the fuck are you doing? The thing is, it doesn't work because there's a lot of people who loved this. I'm not one of them. I can't stand Dumb and Dumber. I like Jim Carrey stuff. This is not it. My wife loves it. If she hears me say these, she's awake in the other room. I was going to say if she heard me say these things, I would hear about it later. Let me rephrase that. I'm going to hear about that later. I've brought this on myself.
The goodwill the studio had built up to that point swallowed whole by a years-long animated, depressive episode.
I don't know, some of them were good. Fox and the Hound. I thought it was a classic. Probably viewed as a classic now, though.
It's a whole bunch of shit wrong with me.
The films were all much darker than their predecessors, both textually and visually. Budgets remained the same on paper, but due to the global energy crisis giving rise to some of the worst inflation in the country's history, these budgets could only cover a fraction of what they used to.
When did this come out? 3 years ago? Yeah, that would do it.
And the sophistication of their animation and color processes were undoubtedly the first to feel the flames. The contrast in quality between even The Jungle Book and The Aristocats, the first film Walt Disney didn't have a hand in producing, is incredibly jarring. Because of this, animation cells moving forward needed to be something that—
Wait, The Jungle Book's one of the newer one? For some reason, I always thought both of those were some of the older ones. Granted, at this point, all of them are the older ones.
could recycle, reappropriate, or retool at a given time to save money on productions down the line. Films needed to feature nearly entirely animal cast.
Wait, that's how they did that? Oh, they literally took a single picture of the background and then had different slides moving it there. And then they could probably cycle the slides as it moved across. Oh, I had no idea that's how they actually did it. It's kind of fascinating and probably closer to what South Park did than not.
Line. Films needed to feature nearly entirely animal casts, as they were cheaper and more expedient to animate than their human counterparts. And
Why?
with techniques like rotoscoping mostly out of the equation, the savings could be pushed towards the production's cast.
Wait, they did rotoscoping in that as well? I thought that was a newer technique. I didn't realize it was that old. For anyone who doesn't know, rotoscoping is essentially or body capture technologies, except older, bad, and kind of creepy. Personal opinion. I've only ever seen it used to make something look incredibly non-human, but close enough to human that it actually hits that category of it's just close enough to normal that it makes it worse. You know, the uncanny valley effect.
Casts and music. In a very real way, this was Disney reverting back to their earliest foundations to try to survive without Walt at the head. Animals performing comedy and drama to music. The only real exception being the Black Cauldron. And much like the Black Cauldron, Walt's passing had cast a long shadow across the once bright kingdom. And that shadow permeated throughout everything the studio produced. And
I mean, it kind of makes sense considering for the longest time, Disney's aesthetic, even decades later, was the cute animal company.
perhaps the most brilliant expression of this era is Wolfgang Reitherman's 1973 New Boy classic, Robin Hood. So let's talk about
Again,
it.
I've
Back in the
never
late 30s,
seen that.
after the release of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Walt had started to express an interest in adapting a literary cycle from the Middle Ages to the silver screen, a little ditty known as Reynard the Fox, following a mythological trickster in his adventures stealing from other animals and fleeing from their wrath so that he could live to pray another day. Fearing the difficulties of portraying a classically antagonistic figure as a hero, though, Walt decided to shelve the project until a more fitting vessel came along for the character. Ultimately, this never came, of course, but not for lack of searching. During production for Treasure Island, for instance, Walt had floated the idea of creating numerous animated shorts that would play alongside Long John Silver's
That just creeps me out. Like the eyes going bulgy the entire time. What the hell, man?
telling the tales of Reynard to Jim Hawkins as sort of moral lessons, fables, not unlike the Black Freighter sequences in Zack Snyder's Watchmen. But again,
The what?
moral lessons, fables, not unlike the Black Freighter sequences in Zack Snyder's Watchmen. But again, it wasn't
Zack Snyder's Watchmen. I thought I saw The Watchmen, but that was what? It's probably something different than I'm thinking. It's probably different because I don't recognize any of that.
quite a good fit, mainly due to the fact that Disney wanted Treasure Island to be the studio's first entirely live-action film, so
Oh.
shelved again. Then came the
That'd be why I
60s,
don't know it.
and this time it really seemed like Walt was going to get his chance. In fact, a title was even chosen for the project, Chanticleer and Reynard, and a team of some of Disney's most promising talent produced a myriad of elaborate storyboards and character designs to pitch as one of their next features. Except there's just one problem. Remember all the financial pitfalls of trying to open more parks? Well, at the beginning of the decade, Roy unsuccessfully tried to convince Walt to discontinue the animated feature division of Disney altogether, but Walt, seeing where his concerns
Yeah, can you imagine if Disney scrapped their animated 2D hand-drawn stuff, showing that they were focusing on easier things and throwing away the thing that made them really successful because reasons. Yeah, that would really suck. It's been a long time and I'm still sore about it.
Lied, struck a compromise to try to mitigate the impending costs of his lofty, animatronic-filled dreams. And so it was decided that after 101 Dalmatians, Disney would only approve one animated film for production every 4 years instead of 2. And unfortunately, the film Chanticleer and Reynard was pitched against was none other than The Sword and the Stone. Camelot had just taken Broadway by storm, and the decision between the two
Camelot was on Broadway? I've never even heard of that one.
seemed rather clear. Chanticleer and Reynard would never make it to the screen, but it wouldn't be the last time we saw them. For only a decade later, they would make their return in a quaint retelling of an altogether different tale of thistles and thievery. Cue opening.
You know, there's been a heap of legends and tall tales about Robin Hood. All different, too. Well,
This, I've never seen Disney's Robin Hood, but I know about this because my wife is obsessed over it. The song he's whistling became the hamster dance. Not because the hamster dance bought any rights to the song. They stole it and no one called them out on it for so long that they got usage of it.
we folks of the animal kingdom have our own version.
I wonder if he's going to play the
story of
song.
what really happened in Sherwood Forest.
Okay, so this is
Nope.
actually like
No, they're not doing
brilliant
it.
on 3 or 4 different levels. First, Robin Hood opens with a classic Disney trope, the storybook opening. As classic a classic trope can be, really,
They did
because the
that a
film
lot.
that defined it was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the first feature-length animation in English ever. The studio wanted to give the impression that despite
Wait, what?
and the Seven Dwarfs, the first feature-length animation in English ever. The studio
Oh. For some reason, I thought Sleeping Beauty was the first. Did I have that backwards? Or was it not in English initially? I don't know.
studio wanted to give the impression that despite its aesthetic differences, this would be another classic that audiences could see as familiar, as esteemed and inviting as the great works of Disney's past. So the
But the lines look cheaper in how they're drawn. It overall looks like a cheaper setup altogether because they're more crayon as opposed to actually lined in.
introduce us to it with the same convention: Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, Pinocchio, Robin Hood. But because this is a new era and the world at large is in the midst of tremendous upheaval, both creatively and otherwise, the convention is given a cunning contemporary twist. The narration isn't just a disembodied voice, he's physically on the page with us, explaining the story as if he himself had written it without the faintest idea that we were coming along to read it. Secondly, the narrator is Alan Adale. Robin Hood is best thought of as a universe with many different facets and interchangeable parts rather than a specific immutable group
He was
of
probably one of the
characters.
players,
Sometimes
wasn't
a Robin
he?
Hood tale simply follows Robin and Little John. Other times it includes an army of his merry men. Sometimes they're but a small band. Other times there's a love interest. Robin Hood has archetypes top to bottom. Almost any plot beat or character
I'm sorry, Random Evangelion? Okay, sure, why not?
Any plot beat or character from one version of his tales over the last 10 centuries can be seamlessly integrated into any other.
What
it's like the Honda Civic of Middle-Age folklore. Alan Adale is
That's not entirely fair. The Honda Civic of middle-aged folklore was literally King Arthur because everyone did something with it. Actually, no, never mind. King Arthur would be the gremlin of civics. Not the gremlin of civics. It's the gremlin of cars if they're metaphorically literature in the Dark Ages. And by gremlin, I mean, what the fuck is going on? I have no idea what's happening. Why is everything happening like this? Why is there a random French OC, Don't Steal, who's just the most famous character now? I'm looking at you, Lancelot. That's not even a joke.
one of his merry men. More importantly, he's one of the named merry men, having at least one ballad named after him and appearing in over a dozen Robin Hood movies, filling the support role as a bard in this mythical literary D&D group. He's a minstrel, originally having joined the merry men after swearing loyalty to Robin if he helped him stop a wedding between the woman he loves and a wealthy knight who had taken her from him, whereupon forevermore he would follow the merry men through the greenwood, singing of their adventures as he went. This is a perfect example of the Honda Civic thing, by the way, because this was originally an origin story of Will Scarlet's. It's speculated that this is why the first time Robin meets him in writing, he's wearing a splash of red. Nothing is sacrosanct as long as whichever characters you're playing are filling their roles. I digress. Thirdly, Alan is Chanticleer. Chanticleer was a rooster, becoming popularized in the Reynard cycle in the 12th century under the title Si comme un appris Chanticleer le coq. While Robin Hood took on the design of Renard, Alan Adale inhabits the form of Chanticleer, the would-be protagonist of Walt's never-realized tale. And this nod is anything but a fluke, because the director of The Sword and the Stone, who also worked on the storyboards of Chanticleer's pitch, is also also the director of this film.
So he did things he
Fourth,
already
and
made.
This is a little basic, but I love it. Alan is often referred to as a songbird by Robin and the rest of the Merry Men, and to convey his lowly station as an anthropomorphic peasant outlaw with a visual shorthand, the rooster is an almost frustratingly perfect casting choice. You have the
Because he's literally known to make sound. They had the entire thing about... Sorry, I got distracted by rooster with a pompadour. What? No, seriously, what? I feel like I'm the one going crazy seeing this.
cultural connotations to it as a bird with an iconic song, but one that lives among the livestock rather than in ornate cages. And its natural features almost perfectly mirror the outfit we see Alan Adale wearing in almost every work he's included in. The splash of red is now imbued into the literal fabric of his being. And finally, what truly makes this such an excellent opening to the film, the performance itself. It is my belief that Robin Hood is Disney's best casted movie of all time. I will
Really?
die on this hill. And Alan Adale is
He said die on the hill and just showed the moment they stabbed Han Solo through the chest. I swear again, I said this is basically a more low-key Maxor, and I'm kind of thinking it's setting up to be completely accurate, not even a joke at this point.
is a perfect example as to why. Voiced by the legendary country singer Roger Miller, Alan perfectly sets
Don
the tone
Bluth?
for the yarn he's about to unravel, and his delivery is so natural, so uncinematic feeling in a way that it doesn't ever really seem out of place in the distinctly English backdrop that the tale takes place in. Which is interesting because Ken Anderson, the lead on Chanticleer Renard, who ended up pitching Robin Hood as well, said that he originally wanted the film to be set in the Deep South, hoping to recapture the spirit of Song of the South. Yikes, 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 yikes. When I've mentioned to people before that half the film's cast speaks in really pronounced Southern accents juxtaposed against the other half's very proper English, they're always kind of surprised. Not that they didn't know intuitively. I mean, it only takes a second of listening to Friar Tuck, voiced by famed Western actor Andy Devine, to notice the vast rift between its actors, but it somehow never sticks out. Every voice in the film falls into place so effortlessly that no one performance calls specific attention to itself outside of the universe of the film. Within here, this makes sense. The best casting, to me at least, is the kind I never feel compelled to consciously acknowledge. Speaking of the film's actors,
Actually, what he just mentioned is something that is very prevalent. The easy way to see when it fails is when you see a Robert Downey Jr. playing something, you're like, oh, that's Robert Downey Jr. And then you have to remember which character he's playing. That's something more common. But the other ones are when you see like a Tom Hanks and you realize, oh, it's Tom Hanks. And then you have to stop. Okay, no, which movie is he in again? I'm watching it right now. I don't remember. So it is actually a prevalent problem that if a character becomes less important than the actor playing it, it's sometimes considered a draw to the box office if people are there for that actor. But a lot of the time, overall, personal opinion, it degrades the movie because you're focusing on the wrong thing.
I think it's probably time we move past its opening credits. After the film's introductory scroll, we cut to Robin Hood and Little John strolling peacefully through the greenery of Sherwood Forest, before being ambushed and pursued by the Sheriff of Nottingham's men. All the while, Alan Adale narrates the pursuit through song and establishes both the film's characterization of its dynamic duo and the duo's relationship with their world and its authorities, or at least these ones. One of the best parts of this film, I think, is actually how short it is, only coming in at around 83 minutes of runtime.
Only 80? Wow. That's like what? An hour, 23 minutes? It's not short, but it's not long in the slightest.
One of the shortest animated features Disney's ever made, because it's forced to develop its characters and plot with an exceptional amount of speed, all without sacrificing any of their depth. Every line and every lyric we hear throughout the film is doing a ton more heavy lifting than it otherwise would be. After the song ends, we cut to Robin and Little John high up in a tree, cast against a brilliant blue sky without a cloud to be seen. The first line of dialogue in the film is Little John saying, "You know something, Robin? You're taking too many chances," as he pulls an arrow out of his shirt, to which
And then he has the arrow through his hat. Oh, that's kind of brilliant, actually.
Robin replies with scoffing reassurance, blissfully unaware of the arrow hanging just inches above his head. In this first interaction shared between our protagonists, the film manages to convey literal centuries worth of character development in under a minute and a half, through a simple tumbling back and forth that quickly becomes its prevailing vein of communication. Little John's foundational overprotectiveness of Robin Hood as his second-in-command and closest companion, and Robin's imperishable lightheartedness as his leader are so completely expressed in these first two sentences, and much of this is due to the informally affectionate breeze with which they deliver them. After establishing the ethos of our characters, we develop their sense of morality. In the next few lines, Little John asks if they're bad people because they rob from the rich to give to the poor, to which Robin facetiously responds that robbing is a naughty word and they just sort of borrow from those who can afford it.
If you don't snatch this chain now, you might miss it. Miss it. He's Ryan Hollins into it with Mike Bibby. Mike Bibby. I keep a Glock with nuts. Don't fight with me. Don't fight with me. Why would you put nuts on a Glock? It's a song lyric, and I'm not going to understand it regardless. Let's just leave it at that.
This is always a really interesting part of any Robin Hood tale, where its writers declare their interpretation of the Prince of Thieves. Each is a little different due to the sheer length of time the legend has existed, and the various contemporary cultural sensibilities projected onto them throughout the
and having to compare themselves to Robin Hood Men in Tights, the absolute best interpretation of Robin Hood ever, and I will stand by that one.
centuries. And it delights me to say that this one is one of my absolute favorite takes on him. Our conversation is cut short by the clamoring of royal trumpets in the distance, as we cut to a wide shot from the forest floor facing the road which pierces through it, as a legion of royally clothed animals march across its frame. It's
Royally
Prince John,
purple.
our main antagonist for the tale, played by the one and only Sir Peter Ustinov.
Taxes! Taxes! Beautiful, lovely taxes! Aha! Aha! This crown gives me a feeling of power! Power! Forgive me a cruel chuckle. Power.
This performance is immediately magnetic. I adore Peter Ustinov in everything he's in. If you ever get the chance to somehow find a copy of Michael Curtis's We're No Angels, please watch it. Even in ensemble pieces, he totally steals the show.
Say something. Go ahead. Say anything at all.
I've got nothing to say, nothing at all. Except,
Except what?
Joseph, it's true. It does bring out the color in your beautiful, big, brown eyes. Oh, to be a painter.
Reitherman's Robin Hood not only places Prince
Okay, I see why he likes that actor.
John in the role of its active antagonist, as opposed to the radiant, largely off-screen source of conflict that the high nobility in Robin's tales usually serve, but it elevates him to the position of its premier performance. I said earlier that the actors' voices in this film don't stand out, which is true. These first few minutes of runtime acclimate us to the geography of its oral landscape, if you will, really brilliantly, by having each of its leads played by either side of this invisible rift, and its contrasting musical identities fading into and out of one another in its opening credits. But this allows its cast to lean way further into their performances in a way that we don't really see in the films Disney released prior to this. Prince John speaks at once like a villainous monster and a spineless child, and neither of these are played even remotely subtly. Rather, they're simultaneous and unconditionally intense.
You know, I've seen this clip all the time, mostly because it came up a lot when Endgame came out. You know, the last Marvel movie that was ever made by Disney. And these clips were everywhere, so I actually learned a bit about this section.
The first time we hear him speak,
He does
he's
sound very
literally just
distinct.
yelling taxes in a jubilant, crackling voice to his ward, Sir Hiss, this film's take on Sir Guy of Gisborne, who is now an actual snake. This is another thing that Reitherman and co do extremely well. The use of an anthropomorphic lens to turn people into furries. I mean, to assign specific human
No, I think he had it right the first time. They know what they did.
characteristics to the various species throughout the film's world. Instead of the sea of broad-shouldered, thick-chested men that Prince John and the Sheriff of Nottingham usually command, in this universe they preside over an army of rhinos and wolves. And instead of squires that look like any girl I'd let gaslight me or Johnny Depp's Willy Wonka, they have elephants, because they're smart. This isn't too dissimilar from Brian Jacques' fairly well-known series of young adult novels, Redwall, that would release 13 years later. You know, an expansive separation of worlds between that of the gentle and
Wait, that came out of the 70s then? I didn't realize Redwall was that old.
animals and that of the brutes, with an inverse power balance in the latter's favor to create drama. Except in this case, I think, no offense to Brian, Reitherman's use of this is much more complex, off the cuff at least, and it accomplishes its goal, subtextual characterization based on an understanding of the animal kingdom through cultural osmosis, with a really impressive speed. Robin and Little John are animals known for dwelling in forests and stealing food. This is a no-brainer for their characters, and where they differ is in one's capacity for combat and the other's dexterity, a handily snug fit for our brotherhood of brigands. Our first shot of Prince John is that of a meek, almost sickly lion, unable to even fill the robes or crown that he's presently cloaked in. Peter Ustinov voices his brother Richard as well upon his return, and the contrast between their designs perfectly renders how antithetical John is to him before he even says a word. The same visual development of a hero-villain dramatic dyad can be seen in Disney's later work as well, in The Lion King with Mufasa.
Oh, on top of that, just the way they're leaning. One is leaning back, the other is leaning forward.
Well, in The Lion King with Mufasa and Scar, the Sheriff of Nottingham is a wolf, patrolling the village and collecting taxes with a tenuous veneer of kindness, as he literally steals from the blind and the crippled. And more than just name only, he is a wolf in sheep's clothing. In fact, Anderson originally wanted the sheriff to be a goat, to experiment with audiences' predisposition towards different animals cast in different narrative roles. So the Sheriff of Nottingham is literally nearly a wolf in sheep's clothing. His archers who help him pick through the bones of the village, as it were, are vultures, and the captain of his guard is a crocodile. Also, and this has pretty much nothing to do with characterization, I'm just a sucker for anything that makes elephants play their noses like trumpets. It just never gets old to me.
Yeah.
Anyways, with the world and its play.
Although, didn't they do that because they reused shots from the Jungle Book to get some of the animations done faster? Or was the Jungle Book the one that did that on top of this? I know they did a lot of animation swapping for various movies in this era. For example, the Sword in the Stone used a lot of things from the Jungle Book as well, but I don't think if this was one or not. I know I've learned it at one point, but I completely forgot it this time.
Players introduced in less than its first 10 minutes, we have the latter 90-ish% of the film's runtime to strike out on literally any of the classic Robin Hood beats in the centuries-long records of his tales. So, why not do them all? Reitherman's Robin Hood slaps so spectacularly hard, not just because of its music or because of its casting, but because it's basically a greatest hits album for the myth itself, particularly its rich history in cinema. I mean, it really ticks almost all the boxes.
All
the
the
vulture
boxes?
shooting at Robin on the rope from the tower window during the Great Escape from Nottingham Castle is actually a reference to how two different Robin Hood films utilized this same set piece. In Lebanon Sherman's The Band of Sherwood Forest, Cornel Wilde, playing the son of Robin Hood, shoots an arrow with a rope attached to it through the tower window to help the boy king of England escape before the Lord.
Oh, so this was literally just references to all the other previous takes on Robin Hood. Oh, so not only were they aware of what came before them, they were explicitly calling it out. That's actually kind of brave because a lot of places try and hide their references because they like the veneer of uniqueness. Where this one is such a blatantly tried and true storyline that they're playing into the fact that a lot of people already know it for different things. It's actually kind of brilliant and shocking in its own right, because I don't think I know anyone who does that now, generally in a big picture film.
Lord Regent William of Pembroke, their film's Prince John, can have him killed. This is also a clever use of calling back to the myth's own visual history to make a joke, because the room in Reitherman's Robin Hood is arranged nearly identically and shot from the same angle as the captive child king, and Robin gently pulling the sacks of gold out from under Prince John's arms as he sucks his thumb almost perfectly mirrors the delicacy with which Lady Catherine wakes the boy up. And the volley of arrows following Robin's departure from the window calls back to the pigeons that John Derrick, as the son of Robin Hood, gives to Lady Marian to send messages back to Sherwood detailing the movements of King John and the Count of Flanders in Gordon Douglas's Rogues of Sherwood Forest. When she goes to release them with a letter to Robin, the first is shot down by one of the crossbowmen who guard her tower. And the list goes on. Our characters are whisked away from the commotion of battle by a drawn cart, like C.M. Pennington Richards' A Challenge for Robin Hood. And Robin scales the castle gates, albeit from the other side, like Douglas Fairbanks, the first Robin Hood to ever grace the screen. It also covers most of the more universally touched upon Robin Hoodism.
So they even went back to the first one on the screen to make a specific reference to that as well. Yeah, this isn't someone who is incredibly well versed in this specific nuance. Now, the question is it someone who just had an absurd knowledge about it, or do they develop it to make it? Either one is impressive, although the second one is more, hey, can I get on this? I have all the knowledge of everything else everyone else has done. Which in its own right might be a reason to get hired.
That most films only utilized one or two of. The archery tournament is easily the most recognizable and iconic example of these, with Robin's disguise most closely resembling Errol Flynn's from Michael Curtis's The Adventures of Robin Hood. For some reason, Robin often fights with a chair at some point in the older films, so he does the same here. We get the gallows in the courtyard of Nottingham Castle, a set piece used as a manifestation of the nobility's cruelty, whether it be Henry II or Richard or John, because they were usually constructed outside of a castle's walls. The closeness to the seat of power is a physical implicit connection between them. We get the reunification, the profession of love in the forest, the castle rescue, and the wedding of Maid Marian, usually portrayed as isolated versions of their love story in previous films, as one continuous one. And we even get the death of Robin Hood in front of Little John, easily the most contentious and least utilized of these iconic beats, or at least the tragedy of it, only to then be immediately subverted by the film. I love the comedy in this film as well. One of the benefits of being a demonstrably less polished production in comparison to the films of Disney's past is that there seems to be a self-awareness to it in its script and its performances. I kind of touched on this earlier, gushing about its cast. Every character's lines have a much fresher, much more instinctive feeling to them than we're used. used to hearing up to this point in the Mouse Kingdom's catalog, and this allows for a lot freer feeling comedic sensibilities than previously could have worked.
See, this is me not understanding what Disney did prior to this very well. I've seen a lot of them, but I never really contextualized them. But if this is the film that allowed them to take creative liberties because it's looking like a lower budget when they're just doing it because they're still just Disney, they have to do it rather than because it's a big focus. Because they were focusing more on the Magic Kingdoms and the various parks. So with the pressure off, they were allowed to do things they weren't able to do then. It's actually kind of fascinating. And what would he consider more constrained? Like, he might go into it, but I almost feel like I need to not just so much watch this movie, but have watched all of the other Disney movies leading up to this one to get the context. Because the context here isn't actually so important with Robin Hood itself as what Robin Hood is progressing from, to show you what the standard understanding of a Disney movie was at the time. And that's more important than even understanding what he's talking about, because he's going to the detail there. I thought in the beginning that not knowing that would have been the big downside here. I might not understand some of the context references, but he's explaining them so well that really what I'm missing here is knowing old school Disney nearly enough. It's kind of fascinating. Also, unfortunately, on that note, this is where I have to cut this one because I spent too long on other videos earlier on and I'm running out of time. It's already been 4 hours. Crap baskets. So unfortunately, this is probably where I'm cutting all the videos today. I'm not even going to get to Epic the Musical, unfortunately. But Breadsword is doing a great job pulling it in and making so many references. And their animation speed did slow down a lot. Not the animation, like the reference speed. Because early on, the first 10 minutes, man, I feel like I'm having a panic attack just going like, oh, I recognize it, I don't recognize it, I recognize it, I don't recognize it, I recognize it. I don't know. I didn't recognize that one. I thought I did, but I didn't because it's something different. No, now I do again. There is a frantic pace to their references to every little beat of what they're trying to achieve, to the point where the audience does not get a chance to rest. And it's impressive, and it draws so much from both having to understand what he's saying and getting the reference to what they do. Now, you can get it without understanding what the reference is to. Me in general. But I'm assuming if you knew every single one of the references and understood every little beat he's doing, this would be so much more impactful. Unfortunately, I'm spending the entire time, it's like, I recognize that. Why does it fit? I almost want to go back and just digest the first few minutes to see what he's saying versus what he's pulling out, to see if his effect he's doing there is to enhance what he's saying, or maybe to say the opposite because of the image he pulled. Or if maybe he's saying something and the image he pulled is exactly against it and he didn't mean that. This is an entire line of dissection that is completely just me being pedantic without any real need. I just like it. I'm weird. I realize that. So either way, for everyone watching, thanks. This was a blast, and I'm glad we got to do it. I'm surprised, though. I didn't realize Breadsword was so highly essay-based, but with such a manic style. And it truly does feel manic. Because that intro was everywhere. It wasn't even just a similar genre. It was, does it have something I could use for image? Then I will put it in. I'm honestly surprised we didn't see the freaking Three Stooges at this point, because it's out there enough that it would probably fit in with this style. And if someone's in the comment section going, no, that's in a different video, I fully believe it already. Very interesting, though. And I'm definitely going to check this out again next week. So for everyone watching, thanks. There'll be a link below. Hit it up. I'll see you in the next one.